What if humans never discovered fire? No warmth. No light. No safety in the dark. Just cold, endless nights, and fear. Not through accident, not through curiosity, and not even through the violent strike of lightning that briefly tears open the sky. Imagine that every spark ever born simply vanished before it could be understood, leaving humanity forever in the dark. In that world, night is not gentle. It does not fade in soft colors or quiet shadows. It arrives suddenly, like a curtain pulled across the sky, swallowing everything in an instant and leaving behind a darkness so complete that even the outline of your own hands disappears. And when the sun is gone, there is nothing left to replace it. No glow. No warmth. No safety. Humans, in this version of existence, never became masters of their environment, never learned to shape the world around them, and never rose above the fragile balance that nature imposed upon all living things. They simply existed, moving, breathing, surviving, without ever truly changing the world they walked upon. During the day, they traveled long distances, barefoot across rough terrain, through forests that whispered with unseen life, and across open plains where danger could be seen from far away but never truly avoided. They carried little, because they could carry little, and everything they owned had to serve a purpose that justified its weight. Because survival allowed no excess. Their bodies were covered in animal hides, carefully stitched together with bone tools and quiet patience, yet no matter how well they prepared, no material could ever replace the warmth that fire would have given them. The cold was not just something they felt. It was something that lived with them. In the air. In the ground. In the wind that cut across their skin and settled deep into their bones. At night, they did not sleep peacefully. They endured. Their bodies trembled uncontrollably, not from fear alone but from a cold so persistent that it felt like a living force pressing against them from all sides, refusing to let go. They gathered close together, forming small clusters of shared warmth, not out of affection or storytelling, but out of necessity. Because without fire, there were no stories in the dark. Only silence. And waiting. Food offered no comfort either. There were no cooked meals, no softened textures, no transformation that made nourishment easier to consume or more efficient for the body. Everything was raw. Tough. Fibrous. Sometimes dangerous. Eating was not enjoyment. It was labor. A slow, exhausting process where the body spent nearly as much energy breaking down food as it gained from consuming it, leaving little room for growth, and even less for progress. Because of this, humans remained limited. Not unintelligent, but constrained. Their minds did not expand into imagination or invention, because survival demanded everything they had, leaving no space for curiosity that did not serve an immediate purpose. During daylight, they moved constantly. Never staying long. Never settling. Because staying meant risk. The land did not belong to them. It never did. It belonged to creatures stronger, faster, and far better adapted to the darkness that humans feared the most. And night always came. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, something shifted within them, not panic, but a heightened awareness, a tightening of instinct, a quiet understanding that the world was about to become far more dangerous. Because darkness was not empty. It was alive. Predators emerged in silence, their movements precise, their presence nearly impossible to detect until it was too late, and without fire, humans had nothing to push back against that threat. No light. No barrier. No advantage. So they hid. They searched desperately for shelter, caves, narrow rock formations, dense clusters of trees, any place that might conceal them long enough to survive the night. But even that was uncertain. Because a shelter, could already belong to something else. They approached slowly, carefully, listening more than looking. Sometimes it was empty. Sometimes it wasn't. And when it wasn't, they left. Immediately. Because in a world without fire, there was no fighting for territory, no claiming ownership, no standing ground against danger. There was only one rule. Avoid what can kill you. So they moved. Again. Time passed, not in moments but in generations, stretching across thousands of years without a single breakthrough that could shift the direction of their existence. Nothing changed. No discovery redefined them. No tool reshaped their future. No spark ignited progress. In another world, fire would have transformed everything. It would have brought warmth to cold nights, light to endless darkness, and safety to a species that desperately needed it. It would have allowed them to gather, to communicate, to build something greater than survival. But here, none of that happened. Night remained silent. Cold. Endless. Language developed slowly, but without fire to gather around, without long nights of shared presence, it never grew into something complex or expressive. Words existed. But only enough. Enough to warn. Enough to guide. Enough to survive. There were no stories. No myths. No dreams spoken aloud. And yet connection still existed. Not through language, but through understanding. Through shared experience, subtle gestures, and an awareness so finely tuned that it replaced the need for words. A glance could signal danger. A movement could signal safety. A moment of stillness could mean everything. They were not alone. But they were not expressive either. They lived in a world where communication was quiet, and survival spoke louder than any voice ever could. Above them, the sky stretched endlessly, filled with stars that burned brightly in the untouched darkness of a world without artificial light. In another version of humanity, those stars would inspire curiosity, questions, and dreams of reaching beyond the earth itself. But here, they remained distant. Untouchable. Because without fire, there was no path forward. No energy. No tools. No future beyond the ground beneath their feet. And yet, despite everything they lacked, something still began to grow. Not power. Not control. But awareness. A deep, instinctive understanding of the world around them, built not through study or science, but through constant exposure, observation, and survival. They learned the rhythms of nature in a way no advanced civilization ever could. They knew when the seasons would shift, when animals would migrate, when danger would come, before it even appeared. They adapted perfectly, not by changing the world, but by becoming part of it. And in that adaptation, they found balance. A fragile balance, but one that endured. Until one day, the sky changed. Dark clouds gathered, thicker and heavier than anything they had seen before, swallowing the light of the sun and turning day into something unfamiliar and uneasy. The wind rose violently. Rain followed. And then, light. A sudden, blinding flash tore across the sky, illuminating everything for a fraction of a second, followed by a sound so powerful that it seemed to shake the ground itself. Lightning. They froze. Another flash. Another roar. And in that brief moment, they saw something impossible. A tree. Burning. Aglow. Alive. Moving. Something that did not belong to their world. They did not understand it. But they could not look away. Because for the first time, darkness had been broken. The storm passed, but something lingered. Not in the sky. Not in the air. But in their minds. For the first time in their existence, humans had witnessed something that did not belong to their understanding of the world, a force that created light in the darkness, warmth in the cold, and movement in something that should have remained still. And even though it lasted only a moment, it changed something inside them. They returned to the place the next day. Slowly. Carefully. As if the ground itself might still hold danger. The forest was quiet again, almost as if nothing had happened, as if the storm had erased its own presence, leaving behind only silence and the faint memory of something extraordinary. But then, they saw it. The tree. Blackened. Broken. Still standing, but no longer alive. They approached it with hesitation, their movements cautious, their senses alert, expecting something, anything, to happen again. But nothing did. No glow. No warmth. No movement. Only stillness. One of them reached out. A slow, uncertain motion. Their fingers touched the surface. Cold. Lifeless. Whatever had existed there was gone. And yet, something remained, not physically, not something they could hold or see, but something deeper, something that stayed with them long after they left that place behind. A question. Not spoken. Not formed in words. But felt. What was that? And more importantly, why did it disappear? In another world, this moment would have been the beginning of everything, the first step toward discovery, toward control, toward a future shaped by human hands. But here, it became something else. A mystery that could not be solved. Because they had no way to recreate it. No way to preserve it. No way to understand it beyond what they had already seen. And so, like many things in their world, it was left behind. Not forgotten, but unreachable. Time moved forward, as it always did, carrying them with it across seasons, across landscapes, across generations that lived and died without ever knowing how close they had come to something that could have changed everything. And yet, something subtle had shifted. They began to watch the sky more often. Not with curiosity as we understand it, but with a quiet awareness, a recognition that the world held forces beyond their control, beyond their comprehension, and perhaps, beyond their reach. Storms were no longer just storms. They were moments of possibility. Rare. Unpredictable. Gone as quickly as they appeared. But in those brief flashes of light, humans saw glimpses of something greater, a version of the world that existed for only seconds, then vanished without a trace. And because they could not hold on to it, they learned to let it go. This shaped them in ways no invention ever could. In a world where nothing could be controlled, where no force could be captured or used, humans did not become creators. They became observers. Masters of awareness. They listened to the wind and understood its meaning. They watched the movement of animals and predicted their paths. They felt changes in the air before the weather shifted. Their intelligence did not build tools. It built intuition. And over time, that intuition became something incredibly powerful, not in the way of technology or dominance, but in harmony, in balance, in a deep connection to the natural world that no modern civilization has ever truly achieved. They did not conquer nature. They belonged to it. And because of that, the earth remained untouched. Forests grew without interruption, stretching endlessly across continents, dense and alive with sounds that never faded into silence. Rivers flowed freely, carving their paths over thousands of years, unblocked, unpolluted, unchanged. Mountains stood as they always had, unbroken by human ambition, their peaks untouched by any attempt to reach them. At night, the planet was completely dark. Not a single artificial light. Not a single signal of civilization. Only the stars. Countless, brilliant, overwhelming in their clarity, shining down on a world that would never reach back toward them. In another reality, those stars would become destinations. Dreams. Goals. But here, they remained what they had always been. Distant lights in an unreachable sky. Humanity, in this world, never built cities. Never formed nations. Never created machines. There were no roads connecting distant lands. No ships crossing vast oceans. No voices carried across invisible networks. Each group lived within its own small existence, shaped entirely by the land around it, never expanding beyond what it could physically reach. And yet, they were not lost. They were not struggling in the way we might imagine. Because they did not know what they were missing. There was no concept of progress. No desire for more. No vision of a different future. Only the present moment. Only survival. Only life, as it was. And in that simplicity, there was something strangely complete. No pollution. No destruction. No species driven to extinction by human hands. Only natural balance. A world that existed exactly as it was meant to. But still, there was a cost. A silent one. Because hidden within humanity was something that never had the chance to emerge, a potential for creation, for imagination, for transformation that remained locked away, never realized, never explored. They lived. They adapted. They endured. But they never became more. And perhaps the most profound question is not what they lost, but whether they ever needed it at all. Because in this world, humanity did not rise above nature. It remained within it. Equal. Balanced. And as time continued, stretching endlessly into the future, nothing changed. No sudden discovery. No turning point. No moment that reshaped their destiny. Only the quiet continuation of life, moving forward exactly as it always had. The stars remained above them. Silent. Endless. Waiting for a species that would never reach them. And somewhere, in another version of reality, a single spark would change everything. But not here. Here? The darkness remained untouched. And humanity remained part of it. And all of this? Because one spark never existed.